America is today the strongest, the most influential, and most productive nation in the world. We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method. The free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. During the long lane of the history yet to be written, America knows that this world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate.
The topic tonight is the hippies, an understanding of whom we must, I guess, acquire or die painfully.
Now, we think, if you ask us how the government is going to be brought down or lost in the shuffle, as we tend to put it, our motto is, ask not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you.
In 1946, as the world reaps its gruesome harvest of human suffering from the Second World War, an iron curtain falls over Eastern Europe. Much European infrastructure is damaged, and Germany lie in a smoldering ruin, bisected between the Eastern and Western victors. The Soviet Union extends her domination over Eastern Europe, creating governments and societies in her own image. Decades of tyranny and oppression are the result. Stalin declares that war with the United States is inevitable, and the Cold War begins.
The theory of subversion goes all the way back 2,500 years ago. The first human being who formulated the tactics of subversion was a Chinese philosopher by the name of Sun Tzu. To 2,500 years BC. He was an advisor for several imperial courts in ancient China. And he said, after long meditation, that to implement state policy in a warlike manner, it's the most counterproductive, barbaric, and inefficient to fight on a battlefield. You know that war is continuation of state policy, right? So if you want successfully to implement your state policy, and you start fighting, this is the most idiotic way to do it. The highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in the country of your enemy, until such time that the perception of reality of your enemy is screwed up to such an extent that he does not perceive you as an enemy, and that your system, your civilization, and your ambitions look to your enemy as an alternative, if not desirable, then at least feasible. Better red than dead. That's the ultimate purpose, the final stage of subversion, after which you can simply take your enemy without a single shot being fired, if the subversion is successful. This is basically what subversion is.
Louis Francis Boudins was a Soviet espionage agent and member of the Communist Party USA. He later renounced communism and became an adamant opponent of it. In 1954, Bunce penned The Techniques of Communism. In Chapter 10 of this work, he writes the following: in undermining a nation such as the United States, the infiltration of the educational process is of prime importance. The communists have accordingly made the invasion of schools and colleges one of the major considerations in their psychological warfare designed to control the American mind. By such cultural work, the Soviet fifth column obtains an influence directly or indirectly over at least a portion of the American youth. As early as 1924, in lectures delivered to the Svedlo University in Moscow, Stalin specified cultural and educational organizations as valuable allies in the communist battle for world dictatorship. It was in 1933, however, that extensive infiltration began in the schools and colleges of this country, encouraged by American recognition of Soviet Russia and stimulated by the open letter to the party. In 1935, the notorious Marxist Frankfurt School, progenitor of critical theory, came to the United States and joined Columbia University. By May 1937, the conspiracy considered that enough progress had been made in the schools and colleges to justify a special article of directives in that month's issue of the Communist, then the official theoretical organ of the party. This article, The Schools and the People's Front, laid it down as a necessity that Marxist-Leninist analysis must be injected into every class. The communists have had a number of advantages in the penetration of schools and colleges. Outstanding among these is the philosophy of pragmatism, as enunciated by Dr. John Dewey, which dominates the present educational process. Pragmatism is not a communist philosophy, but it serves as a convenient cover under which the Reds may operate, and also under which they may win many allies in the educational field. The philosophy of pragmatism rejects the supernatural and declares that there is no absolute good or absolute truth, and that morality is growth, and growth is morality.
What subversion is? Basically, it consists of 4 periods. The first stage of subversion is the process which is called, basically, demoralization. It says for itself what it is. It takes from, say, 15 to 20 years to demoralize a society. This is the time sufficient to educate one generation of students or children. One generation.
Budins was not alone in his assessment that the communists were infiltrating the education system. Former FBI agent W. Cleon Skousen, an expert on communist strategy, listed the goals of communism. These were read into the congressional record on January 10, 1963, by Congressman Albert S. Herlong, Jr. Among the communist goals for conquering America was to, quote, get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda, soften the curriculum, get control of teachers' associations, put the party line in the textbooks, and gain control of all student newspapers. Another high-ranking communist defector, Bella Dodd, explained in her testimony before the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee in 1952 just how powerful those infiltrators could be. From her testimony, as a matter of fact, you have over 1 million teachers in America, and, by and large, your schools are not manned by communists. The communist influence is important only where it's strategically placed, and no communist is ever satisfied with remaining in a position of inferiority. He seeks a strategic position. If you had communists in these schools of education, that's a very strategic position, because not only are they affecting the philosophy of education, but they are also teaching other teachers, who, in turn, are teaching pupils. If you have one communist teacher in the school of education, and he teaches, let's say, 300 teachers, who then go out all over the United States, that is a strategic position. Budins described it similarly. He said, 2 or 3 communists on any faculty are normally enough to dominate the school or campus. They do not act alone, but have aid from the outside. It's not unusual that certain men of wealth on the board of trustees give protection to the subversives on the faculty, to the detriment of those who are genuinely patriotic. They may also have received support from local community organizations previously infiltrated. The seeds of this infiltration of the American educational system would produce a bumper crop of anti-American revolutionaries and violence in the 1960s counterculture movement that saw the rise of the Weathermen, the Students for a Democratic Society, the hippies and the yippies, and many other often self-described communist revolutionary groups.
These are leaders of the nationwide youth organization that calls itself SDS, Students for a Democratic Society. It has more than 300 chapters on the college campuses of America. Its national and local leaders, in convention here at the Chicago Coliseum, June 1969, take the major credit for the rioting, mob actions, takeovers, and burnings on college and university campuses throughout the nation.
Since we've been finding out about the organization of SDS, we've always been quite willing to talk about
We'll talk about socialism anywhere, in the streets or in the Senate, anywhere, you know. I'm Mike Klonsky, National Secretary of SDS, and this is Bernadine Dorn, Interorganizational Secretary. So you feel you or not?
Is there a communist faction making a big power play for SDS at this
On
time?
the, is there any communists back here? I guess there is.
SDS is not, and the movement in this country is not something that exists during the school year and is going to start up again in the fall, and that they have to worry about whether we're going to be in the streets in the fall. We're going to be on the streets and in every institution in this country from now on.
What would you put? We're going to replace capitalism with socialism.
Is SDS, Mark, really interested in Columbia, or is it just a stepping stone? Are you concerned with something much bigger than Columbia? Why did you use Columbia, or did you use Columbia?
I'd say that neither is true, or both are true. So what it is a training ground.
Prairie Fire, The Politics of Revolutionary Anti-Imperialism, the Political Statement of the Weather Underground. Published in 1974, Prairie Fire outlines the political goals of the Weather Underground. Prairie Fire sought to be an organizing document for the communist insurgency in the United States. It claimed to be an analysis of the activities that had taken place in the 60s, to provide a summation of the lessons learned, and to provide a general direction for ongoing activities. It begins thusly. Here is Prairie Fire, our political ideology, a strategy for anti-imperialism and revolution inside the imperial U.S. On page 1, they describe themselves thusly. We are a guerrilla organization. We are communist men and women, underground in the United States for more than 4 years. They go on to state that their intention is to disrupt the empire, to incapacitate it. They go on to say, our intention is to forge an underground, a clandestine political organization engaged in every form of struggle, protected from the eyes and weapons of the state, a base against repression, to accumulate lessons, experience, and constant practice, a base from which to attack. Moreover, they describe their aims this way. The only path to final defeat of imperialism and the building of socialism is revolutionary war. Revolution is the most powerful resource of the people. To wait, to not prepare for the fight, is to seriously mislead about what kind of fierce struggle lies ahead. Revolutionary war will be complicated and protracted. It includes mass struggle and clandestine struggle, peaceful and violent, political and economic, cultural and military, where all forms are developed in harmony with the armed struggle. Without mass struggle, there can be no revolution. Without armed struggle, there can be no victory. Later in the document, they write this of home and family. The individual capitalist family structure is a wasteful social form, not healthy for children to grow up in, a trap for women. It is a sanctioned form of sexual exploitation and hypocritical double standard. The family breeds competitiveness among us, allows no future to women with grown children, and demeans old women, separating them from the life of the community. So this was just a brief look at the subversion of one American institution, that being the educational system. Simultaneously, this same kind of subversion took place in all our institutions: the media, entertainment, religious institutions, every sector of American society. With this background in mind, it's easy to look around at what's going on today and see where it came from. I'll leave you with a speech from Spiro Agnew, and whatever you might think of Spiro Agnew, listen to what he says. I believe his assessment of the situation at the time was accurate, and I believe it's just as accurate today.
Sometimes it appears that we're reaching a period when our senses and our minds will no longer respond to moderate stimulation. We seem to be approaching an age of the gross. Persuasion through speeches and books is too often discarded for disruptive demonstrations aimed at bludgeoning the unconvinced into action. The young, and by this I don't mean by any stretch of the imagination all the young, but I'm talking about those who claim to speak for the young, at the zenith of physical power and sensitivity, overwhelm themselves with drugs and artificial stimulants. Subtlety is lost, and fine distinctions based on acute reasoning are carelessly ignored in a headlong jump to a predetermined conclusion. Life is visceral rather than intellectual, and the most visceral practitioners of life are those who characterize themselves as intellectuals. Truth is to them revealed rather than logically proved. And the principal infatuations of today revolve around the social sciences, those subjects which can accommodate any opinion and about which the most reckless conjecture cannot be discredited. Education is being redefined at the demand of the uneducated to suit the ideas of the uneducated. The student now goes to college to proclaim rather than to learn. The lessons of the past are ignored and obliterated in a contemporary antagonism known as the generation gap. A spirit of national masochism prevails, encouraged by an effete core of impudent snobs who characterize themselves as intellectuals.